Hi, everyone. Welcome to our COVID vaccine safety for kids Q&A. I would like to thank you for taking the time out of your evening to join us. And I would like to let you know my name is Andrea Vaughn. I am the WFSE AFSCME Council 28 Vice President. Super excited to be here tonight with you all. COVID vaccine safety for kids is something that a lot of people have been asking about. And so our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee has decided to sponsor this question and answer. So I'm really excited to be here once again with you all. As you know, our union fights for the safety and well-being of all union families, and we have prioritized getting accurate and reliable information about the COVID-19 vaccine out to our members. So this is part of that. And those efforts have included our first WFSE panel on the COVID-19 vaccine, which we held mid-January with some of the same amazing doctors that we have here today. We're super excited to welcome you back today and to have this conversation about keeping our kids safe. We heard you loud and clear after our first panel that getting to ask real doctors questions about the vaccine was super useful and was very much appreciated by everyone. Now, many of us in Washington have been able to access the vaccine, but a lot of us still have questions about getting our kids protected and vaccinated. I know I do. I know I have 2 children and I still have questions, even though they're in the process of getting vaccinated. One is fully and the other one is almost fully vaccinated. And the difficult truth is, even though children have a lower chance of becoming seriously ill or passing away from COVID-19, COVID has become a leading cause of death among children. Here today with me to delve into this topic and shed some light on the questions, we have Dr. Catherine or Kat Delostrinos. She's a pediatrician at Kaiser Permanente, and Dr. Ahmed Ali, Executive Director of the Somali Health Board. So please welcome them, and I would like to allow you both to introduce yourselves at this time.
I can start. Hi, I'm Dr. Kat Delostrinos. I'm a pediatrician at Kaiser Permanente in Federal Way, as well as in Kent. I've been a pediatrician for about 10 years at Kaiser, and I did my residency at Seattle Children's Hospital. I've grown up in the Pacific Northwest, so it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. Ahmed Ali. I am a practicing pharmacist at Othello Station Pharmacy, and I'm also the director of Somali Health Board, which is a nonprofit organization based in King County with ambitious goals of addressing health disparities within immigrant and refugee communities throughout the county. I have had the firsthand experience particularly working with a large of our community that is immigrant refugee during the COVID pandemic, and more so now when it comes to access to the COVID vaccines throughout King County. So I'm looking forward to having a good conversation with Dr. Delostrinos and others here as well. Thank you.
Thank you both once again for being here. So let's get right into it with some questions for our panelists. If anyone has questions you'd like to ask, please put it in the chat and we will answer as many as we can and as many as we have time for. So I'm going to start with the first question we have. Is the COVID vaccine safe for kids? And both or one of you can answer this question.
Dr. Ali, did you want to start?
Go ahead, Dr. Delostrinos.
All right. Yes, it is safe for children. And I say this to all of my patients with every single vaccine that I recommend. I would never recommend a vaccine that I didn't think was safe. I wouldn't get one for myself. I wouldn't get one for my child or recommend it to my family if I didn't think it was safe. Thankfully, this vaccine has been tested and studied in children, and definitely in children down to at least the age of 12 for the past year in dozens of children's hospitals throughout the country, and continues to be studied for its safety, both for the kids who are getting it for the first time, but then also studying the children who have gotten it. And so I believe it's safe. It's something that once my son is old enough to get, I will be getting it for him. And I would never do that for my son if I didn't think that that was the case.
To add on to what Dr. Delostrinos had mentioned, vaccines are oftentimes, there's quite a process that they follow to make sure that the safety and efficacy is proven. And there are multiple phases, 4 phases actually, all vaccines. I know when we talk about safety and the COVID, a lot of folks have asked themselves, why was the vaccines produced in a matter of a year when usually it takes years to produce vaccines? But we know that there are multiple reasons as to why. And when it comes to the production of the vaccines, each and every step that any other vaccine that has ever been manufactured in the United States was followed. Along with that, there are also independent committees that are off of independent from the manufacturers themselves, independent off of the government, that actually oversee the results, they oversee the efficacy, and they oversee the safety. Initially, we've known that the current vaccine that is being used for children 12 and older, Pfizer BioNTech, was authorized for 16 and older. And the last several months, it was authorized for 12 and older, based on after finding and making sure that there are multiple research showing that there's the safety of it, the vaccines have been upheld. And our children are the most precious, and for the medical community to ensure that something like this goes to be used for our children, it has to make sure that these are ultimately not going to cause any type of harm. I know, looking back at the research itself, in order for the FDA to approve those, the effective of it has to be, if not better, close to what it was for the adults as well. So about 2,200 children were followed, of which a certain percentage of them were given the vaccine and others were given placebo. And it actually showed that 100% of the kids who were actually vaccinated were actually fully protected from COVID, in comparison to 95% in adults, which clearly shows it's very effective. But just as much as Dr. Delostrinos mentioned, as much as she will not advocate for anyone to get the vaccine if it's not safe for her own kids, I personally will not have done the same thing for my own children. I have a 12-year-old and I have a 14-year-old, and both of them are fully vaccinated as of today. So I know we've done a ton of research looking into it, and my children are the most important things to me in this world. So I know that the vaccines that we have in this country are safe and effective.
Thank you for providing those very thoughtful and evidence-based answers to this question. Also, another question: how old do children need to be to receive the vaccine? I know it started out being 16 and older, and it's progressively changed. So what is the recommendation right now?
So right now, the Pfizer vaccine has been approved for children ages 12 and up. So any child on their 12th birthday can get their Pfizer vaccine and get both doses, as well as get any other vaccines that they may be due for at the same time or at any time before or after the vaccine.
Thank you. Are there any side effects that we should be concerned about or watch out for?
Yeah, so just like the COVID vaccine for adults, there are usually common reported side effects that probably any of you that received the vaccine probably encountered. And it could be anything from, you've got needle going through your arm, pain where you got the vaccine, injection site reaction. Sometimes, because of the immune response, fatigue, headache is possible. muscle pain and fever, something that probably most likely a Tylenol will take care of. And it doesn't last anything longer than a day or two, 24 hours to a certain extent in most adults as well as children. My sons, both of them received the same day. The oldest one didn't feel anything, in both doses, surprisingly, other than just being fatigued and, of course, an injection site reaction. But the younger one felt a little bit of, had a fever a day and kind of went away, and were fine 2 days later, both of them. So those are some of the things that I can think of the top of my head, and Dr. Delostrinos can add anything else to that.
Yeah, there have been some reports of children developing symptoms of a condition called myocarditis, which is where there's an inflammation of the heart muscle. And it usually presents with kids feeling fatigued, having a fast heart rate, and very, very similar to the symptoms that many of us had after we got our second shot. What we have been able to say with all of those children, however, is that they all of their symptoms resolved. And I think the thing to remember as well is that while in this very small number of children who had these symptoms, there were many more children who, with the virus itself, also had that same myocarditis. And what we don't know about those kids, we hear a lot about long-term COVID symptoms, is whether or not after having had the infection and had those symptoms, if that would cause any long-term effect. What we do know about the vaccine is that that's not the case with the vaccine, because again, you aren't getting sick with the virus itself. So I think going back to before we had the vaccine, there were reports also of kids who had COVID who maybe were not very symptomatic when they first had it, but about a month later had what appeared to be an autoimmune response where they became very sick, had very high fever. Some of them actually went into heart or lung failure and ended up being admitted to the hospital. And some of those patients, 2 of those patients are actually my patients. And so, it can be very scary to give your child something that will inevitably or may, right, give a small number of children some symptoms, some side effects. What we do know about the vaccine is those are very short-lived. What we don't know about the virus itself, if they were to get the virus, what that could inevitably mean. And so, yeah.
It seems like so much to think about and so much to take in. So I appreciate you thoroughly answering these questions. We are going to open it up to the audience to ask questions. We do have one question. It says, what is the timeline we're looking at for younger children? Example, I have a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old. When would they possibly be able to get the vaccine?
Dr. Ali, what have you read?
They're continuously doing a lot of research on that, and I think the most important reason why they're not able to say, okay, well, 2-year-olds can get the vaccine at this point is to make sure that the right dose is given and it's not going to be harmful to our children, and at the same time, how often will that will the duration be in terms of getting the vaccine? So it's for a very good reason that we're not able to get these doses right now for younger children, as much as I think it would have been great to be for us to have the accessibility for younger children. But clearly it indicates, again, the caution and the due diligence that the government is taking, that the manufacturers are taking, to ensure that the safety is the top priority, to ensure, particularly with the vaccinations. I'm hearing they're possibly a lot sooner. I don't know how, probably after the summer to a certain extent. there's research probably considering the amount of data that's being collected, it's possible that it could be a lot sooner than that. But honestly, I think at the end of the day, all these decisions come down to, is it safe? Is it efficacious? And, are we going to be able to protect our children? And, I don't think there's a specific timeline I can think of right now. Maybe, in a PEDS world, probably there are some information out there, but I don't have any particular date set at this point.
Yeah, I wish I had more information. I think what the information that's out there is what we know. And, just like Dr. Ali was saying, what we have to confirm is the safety. But then also what we need to know is how much the dose, what dose, as well as is going to be efficacious. Because what we might discover with younger kids is that they might need more or they might need less. And we have to go through the due diligence to determine that, because at the same time, while maybe giving them more might not be harmful, if for anybody that's ever watched their child get a vaccine, it's sometimes there's a large volume in that needle, and and if we don't have to give that whole entire large volume, that could mean a less sore thigh in a child or a baby, and that's worth it, to know that information. And so as far as the when is it going to be available, the reports that I've read, and again I'm getting this through news sources as well, is hopefully by the end of the year. I'm not going to lie, I really wish it happens before the school year starts. It would be really neat if we could have it. And I was so happy that it was approved when it was. Could it happen then? I don't know. What I do know is that, again, those same dozens of hospitals that did the research in order to test the 12 and above, again, they're recruiting thousands of patients, and it's a matter too of getting the right amount. And so, of course, that could add to possibly the delay as well, as far as, knowing the information, because nobody wants information that was only for a small group of kids. We really want to know it for a large group of kids. So I know for a fact Seattle Children's is one of the places that's doing some of the research. But again, there's the whole conglomeration of children's hospitals are doing the research for this, and I hope that we can find out soon.
Thank you so much. We have another audience question to follow up with that one. With respect to mask wearing and fully vaccinated parents with kids, should fully vaccinated parents with kids continue to wear masks in public until their children are vaccinated? What risk are parents putting their children in?
It's a great question, and a question that I get asked a lot. So what we do know about fully vaccinated adults is that their risk of not only contracting the virus, but also spreading the virus is extremely low. And so their risk of giving COVID to their children is also very, very low. Whether a parent decides to wear their mask in public until their child is vaccinated really ends up being up to the parent. I'm not going to lie, I still do it mainly in solidarity of my son, because he still has to wear his mask, and it would be pretty unfair if my 4.5-year-old had to wear a mask and I didn't. And so, it's more of, in the same way we all have to wash our hands, before we eat, we all have to, all of those things. It kind of, just makes it a, that added incentive of wearing it and keeping it on. As far as wearing masks in public, so that's more of the case of wearing masks in public indoors. And again, we want to make sure we're following those guidelines of wearing our masks indoors for those who are not vaccinated, right? So our children included. But as far as wearing masks outdoors, what we've been able to determine in this whole 1.5 years is that the risk of spread in outdoor spaces when we are, fairly well spread apart is low. And so I think the big question is, what about my kids when they go outside? I think if they're outside and they're playing in a field, that's fine. If they're, around a really big crowd, it would probably be a good idea for them to wear it. Because at the same time, you also don't know who may be unmasked, who may not be vaccinated, and who might be spreading it. So.
I think that the key word there is wearing your mask in solidarity with your kids. I think that's pretty strong statement because at the end of the day, I mean, we've come a long way in a year and a half. 6 months ago and today drastically different. And we're here in King County. We're lucky to be able to have vaccinated over 70% of our population. But at the same time, we also need to be careful with the younger ones who are not fully vaccinated or or partially vaccinated to a certain extent. Same way as Dr. Delostrinos mentioned, I think we use the same judgment of making sure that we're going out where we wear masks as well. Is not mandatory as of today. We know that for folks who are vaccinated. But at the same time, of course, we've got younger kids at home. And if the parents and my 14, 12-year-old are not wearing masks, but you're asking my 4-year-old and 6-year-old to wear masks, I think it's pretty unfair to a certain extent. And most likely they might not be able to fully follow that if you're not around. So I think, continuously supporting those folks, or those young ones who are not fully vaccinated, and also continuing enforcing the social distancing, hand washing to a certain extent until we fully are within the herd immunity that we expect to have and combat this virus.
Thank you. I would like to point out I do have my great nephew here. I am fully vaccinated. He just stopped by to visit, so just welcome this little bunch of love. I do have another question. What sources can help us learn about the vaccine, and kind of connected to that, how do we know if what we're hearing is accurate and reputable?
Dr. Ali, I'll let you answer that one first.
Yeah, I think the most important trusted person that you should talk to is your doctor. Have a conversation with your pediatrician, have a conversation with your regular doctor, someone that you often go to and discuss your health needs. Also be able to see if you can connect with other people from your community as well, who are in a leadership position to answer certain questions. Might not be related to medical content to a certain extent, but at the same time can lead you in the right direction. What I will highly discourage folks not to follow is the stuff on social media, things people keep sharing in terms of misinformation about the vaccine, misinformation about, you see that on TikTok and Instagram, and, a lot of nonsense that a lot of times just it's sort of like a, bait and watch type of misinformation. To date, we know that the vaccines are safe. We recognize people have questions, and people can make decisions solely based on the information that they have. But you always want to go to the right person. If I am interested in fixing my car, I'm not going to take it to my doctor to go fix my car. I'm going to take it to the mechanic, but that's what the mechanic does. Think of it from that angle. So the doctors who are often taking care of your children have the utmost interest of your child's health. And while the COVID vaccine is new to us and it's groundbreaking in so many ways, considering where we were a year and a half ago, I think it's also worth asking the right questions and making sure that you're making an informed decision about your child.
Thank you.
Dr. Ali, I was just going to add one more thing to that. Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Andrea, fantastic. So Dr. Ali, I couldn't agree with you more. I think what's really important is that you do have a doctor that you know and trust. I think, that's really where it starts. And one thing that I always tell my patients is, especially with the questions that I've been getting about this vaccine and just COVID in general, is that what's scariest about this vaccine is that we don't get to go to the people that we usually go to, right? People who've had experience with something, you know, being a parent, right? And asking them, well, what was your experience and how did it turn out, right? Because that's usually our go-to. But unfortunately, nobody's had this experience. And that I think is what has made it so scary. And so what I really encourage people to do is go to the people that you know and trust, who you know will give you good information. And maybe you go to people that you know have gotten it, and maybe to some people who haven't, and ask them that question. Why did you make that decision? And I encourage parents to be really selective in who you ask, because you also want to make sure that these are people that aren't going to judge you in whatever decision that you do make, because it's already so hard to be a parent. And it's so hard to make decisions that nobody can tell you what the outcome is going to be in 50 years, right? Whereas, you know, usually if you ask your mom, if I do this, what's going to happen, right? I mean, so we always know that. And I think that's what's scary. But what I will say is that if you go to the people who you know, who you trust, who have your best interests in mind, and who you know won't judge you for asking that question, and you know, and whatever decision that you do make, then those are the people that will help guide you in making this decision. And I really encourage everyone, you know, find a doctor that you do respect and trust, and who respects you and your questions and your decisions, because the decisions that we make for our children are never out of spite or, you know, malicious. They're all, we all make decisions as parents out of love for our children. And that, it's important that you have a doctor that understands that, and that your hesitation is not because you don't love your children, but as a matter of fact, because you do love your children. And, you know, I always encourage parents, find a doctor who will love your children the same way that you love your children, and the same way that they would want their own children to be loved.
That's so important. Find people that will love your children the same way that you will love them, or you want them to be loved, and talk to people that are not going to judge you for the choices that you make. That's so important. Of everything that's been said tonight, I think those two are super, super important. I want to highlight another question. It was, when will we be at herd immunity?
I think so herd immunity, which also called community immunity, occurs when a high percentage of the community is vaccinated, or through a prior illness, or has gone through that process, making it spread of the disease difficult or unlikely. And there's many there are, you know, statisticians or experts put that in different percentages. It can range anywhere from 70 to 90% of the population need to be vaccinated in order to curb the spread of the virus, and in this case, COVID-19. So, you know, 80% is what I will most likely push it around because once all of us are vaccinated, a large number of the population vaccinated, it becomes difficult for the vaccine to spread from one person to another. And I think that's when we reach that point whereby now we've reached a herd immunity. But I think it becomes difficult when we have a certain number of the population is not vaccinated, fully vaccinated, and hesitant for whatever reason. Then the likelihood of the virus, continuously spreading and being in that circle continues. So that's, I think, the definition of herd immunity.
Yeah, I think it's also important to think about, what Dr. Ali was saying was community immunity, right? Because you could take a percentage of the number of people vaccinated in this state, but then if you were to take the middle school that your child might be going to, right? If you haven't reached that, whatever number, people decide what it's going to be. What we have to remember is that it's the communities in which we're in that have to have that percentage. It can't just be, a state as a whole. We have this, but then, if I'm, in a building with 100 people and, we don't have that 70% within that community right there, then that's a moot point. So.
Thank you. I think kind of connected to that would be a question of, do you have any advice for sending kids back to school?
Yeah, so, I think one thing that I've been really pleased to see is that, with the recommendations that they've made for schools, the social distancing, the mask wearing, if you're symptomatic, you have to go get COVID tested. Those have proven to be very effective. And, I think, it should children go back to school this fall, even if they haven't been vaccinated. I think it's safe. I've seen enough, I've taken care of enough patients throughout this pandemic that of the patients that I've seen who have gotten it, none of them have gotten it from school. All of them have gotten it from an adult that they encountered, or like a party or a gathering that they encountered, or where they had someone else. And for every child that I have seen that's been in school, especially for kind of these last few months, they're the ones that actually tell me what the rules are. You have to wear a mask, you have to be 6 feet apart. And I think what's really remarkable is what's just been so amazing to me is how adaptable our children have been. Right? Because this pandemic has been so hard on us as adults, so hard on us as parents. But I think sometimes we neglect to recognize that, our kids have been just right on this journey with us, and have just been going along with. And when we ask them to wear a mask, they've been wearing a mask. And when we tell them to wear their mask to school and wash their hands and sit far apart from their friends, they're like, hey, if that's how I can go to school, then they do it. And it's really remarkable. And I always try my best to tell my patients, when I know that they've been in in-person school or even been at home, just thank them for being so resilient this past year and a half.
Yeah, and in addition to that, I think it's important to note that schools play a very important role when it comes to not just the education achievement, but the health and well-being of our kids. And as Dr. Delostrinos has mentioned, I mean, kids have been really resilient overall in the last year. And, I feel comfortable at this point for even my own younger little ones who are in preschool and first grade, for them to go back to school, because I've noticed that they have actually mastered the skill of making sure they're social distance, even in the play field. I think knowing that we are, in terms of the trajectory of the virus at this point, particularly here in King County and state of Washington, things are getting a bit better. I feel much more comfortable for kids go back to school. But at the same time, for the older children, for children who are, within the age of to be vaccinated, for the families to make an informed decision in terms of what that will mean for their children and the other children that they'll be playing with and hanging out with during the school season.
Thank you. I know that you kind of mentioned earlier that we could do COVID vaccines at the same visit with other vaccines. So it kind of goes to the question of how can I and where can I get an appointment for my child or teen to get the vaccine, and can they get the COVID vaccine with their other vaccines?
Yeah, so how you can get it, I know that well, if you or your family are Kaiser patients, that's something that you can easily go on the Kaiser website and schedule an appointment. Most of our clinics now carry all of the different types of vaccines, including the Pfizer vaccine that your 12 and up can get. I mean, I think access is a big issue as well. And I've encouraged patients, no matter where you're seeing, if there's a drugstore that's close to your house that's offering it, you don't have to make a long drive for it. You can go ahead and have it done there. Thank you, Justine. And then, be reassured that that if your child was due for any other vaccines, if they were to have gotten those vaccines, a few days before, they can still get their COVID vaccine the day they turn 12. If they got their COVID vaccine, they don't have to wait. And this is, I mean, that wasn't the case when the COVID vaccine first came out. But again, because it was, all of these variables are being studied, what we were able to tell was that you can get any vaccine at any time around the COVID vaccine or on the same day.
Yeah, I think this show also indicates the understanding of the vaccine itself in the short period of time that we have been able to utilize, because initially one of the screening questions when we're vaccinating adult was, if you've received another vaccine within 4 weeks period, then we will have to wait for you to get the COVID vaccine at a different later time. But then enough studies have shown that there's no interaction, there's no issue taking the COVID vaccine along with another vaccine. That also points out to the amount of research that goes into ensuring the safety of the vaccines overall. So that's just something else to kind of remember. I also just want to point out that, with the abundance of the availability of the vaccines at this point in the state of Washington, there are so many places that you can get your vaccine. And Justine just put in the link up there for the COVID vaccine finder. And there are so many places in the Seattle area that you can walk in, and you don't need an appointment as well. And multiple communications going on from DOH. Before, when we had limitations in terms of the number of vaccines that were coming or the facilities have access to, we were turning some people and telling them, come back the following day because we don't want to waste a vaccine by opening a vial at this point. But now you can actually show up and you're the only one that gets the vaccine at 5 p.m. and you should be able to get that vaccine for your child. So just remember that, there are multiple places that for families who have working and want to go on a weekend or maybe late in the evening, you can Google, you can search, and there are places that you can just walk in and get the vaccine for your child as well.
Thank you. Do you have any tips for talking to kids and or teens about the vaccine?
Oh, Dr. Ali, what did you tell your children?
I think for me, my 14-year-old was really excited about it. He has been reading about the vaccine for some time, and he's all doing his own research. He's the kind of kid that would actually keep track of the places around the world that was, where the pandemic was happening in different places. And he was fascinated by the whole concept of how the vaccines to work. So it wasn't much for convincing for my oldest son to get the vaccine because he was looking forward to when it comes out. But the younger one, it's just, let him know what the vaccines do and how much they protect him, and the importance of protecting himself and his friends who he will be playing with when he goes out there to play. They both play actively. They play soccer, and that in itself was, it's a sport whereby they don't have to wear a mask when they're playing outdoors. And I wanted to make sure that they're safe while they're around their friends, and at the same time, their friends are safe as well. So we did have that conversation with the 12-year-old that, hey, your brother's thinking about getting the vaccine. You're also qualified to get the vaccine. Do you want to get it? And I think there were just a bunch of questions like, hey, how am I gonna feel? I don't even like going to the doctor to get a vaccine by getting shots and things like that. And just explain to them the same thing as yes, you will get a little bit of injection site reaction. Of course, that's possible. You might get headache towards an extent. Just having that conversation candidly as I would have with any other adult. And by the time the vaccines were out, they were able to get that, both of them at the same time.
Yeah, I think we shouldn't underestimate what our children do understand about COVID and the COVID vaccine. I was with my nephew the other day, who's 5, and he didn't want to leave the house without his mask on, and he was like, "Mom, I haven't been vaccinated yet. I need to put on my mask," And so, I think, kids, even as young as 5, they in the same way that they've been really good about wearing their masks and social distancing, they really have come to understand why. And what we're trying to avoid, and how this virus has spread. And so, I would definitely, I guess I would approach, talking about the vaccine in whatever way has worked for you with other vaccines, because we all know our children and we all know how they react when they're going to get a vaccine. And some of our children are less excited about it than others. If it's a matter of allowing, or having that discussion and asking your child and giving your child the opportunity to help make that decision for themselves, I think that's wonderful to have that discussion. And again, I would actually even start the conversation the same way as you did, Dr. Ali, of asking them what they know about it. What do they know? What questions do they have? What do they want to get out of it? Why do they want to get it? And what are they worried about? And how, because our children are really smart. And like I said, we really have to give them credit, especially for knowing and understanding what's happened in this past year and a half. And I think that the conversation will actually be fairly easy. You might be surprised your 12-year-old might even know more than you. And then too, I mean, if you're curious as to where they're getting their information, just keep it an open conversation. Where are you getting that information? And then going as a team together. Well, let's find some reliable information, or let's go to this person. Let's go to our doctor who we trust, and let's ask them together. I think those are really kind of nice approaches. It really will allow your child to feel as though they're part of that conversation. But again, if you know that even talking about vaccines might be worrisome to your child, you all know your children, so.
We have time for one more question. I kind of want to get into it a little bit, and it's kind of connected to the last question I asked. Can you talk a little bit about mental health concerns from the pandemic for kids and teens? And then also, I know before we started the Q&A, you both kind of touched on the fact that you've had some teens that have wanted to actually get the vaccine, and their parents have been hesitant. So could we maybe talk about those two things in the last 10 minutes?
Yeah, I can talk about that one. So I'll start first with the children who want to get the vaccine and their parents have been hesitant. So this has actually come to me quite a bit in these last few weeks. And what what's legally possible for a child right now, and this is for children 13 and over, is that children 13 and over can seek medical care and obtain medical care for the subjects pertaining to sexual health, mental health, and drug and alcohol abuse help. Unfortunately, the COVID vaccine is not within those particular subtypes. And so a child cannot sign for themselves. An 18-year-old can, but anybody under the age of 18 cannot get the vaccine for themselves. And so what I've really encouraged for these patients that I saw was, again, to have a candid conversation with your parents, to look at the resources out there and the reliable resources out there, allowing each other to just to question each other's resources, right? Because we also don't know where our children might be getting their resources as well, right? Their information. And so being open-minded and being respectful to each other as you guys kind of delve into that. And I think going together, like I said, to that trusted person, right? That trusted resource, hopefully a trusted doctor, to have that conversation together. Now, when it comes to mental health and the pandemic, what I've seen this past year has really, it's, again, I think what we all have to recognize is just how resilient our children have been. But in the same way that we have been anxious, for a child to see their parents be anxious and not have the answers, whereas most of the time their parents do have the answers, is added a whole nother level of kind of stress and anxiety. And their parents who have always kind of reassured them everything's going to be okay. Kids know, and kids can tell that parents don't have the answers right now, and so that to them has been really scary. What I will say is, especially for younger kids, the youngest of kids, especially, distraction, going out and doing things that that are, maybe were the norm before the pandemic happened, right? Going to the park, going outside, those types of things. I encourage that. But I like Dr. Ali had mentioned, the kids going to school, I think, have made a big impact on their mental health, and just being able to be somewhere else for that, whether it's 2 or 4 or 8 hours a day. I don't think we recognize that was their protected time away from us, right? That was their time to get to be them, their school self, rather than their self around their parents, right? And so, giving them that opportunity, I think is really important, and has been, has really shown me how important it was for kids to go back to school safely, albeit, but it has been really important. So.
I think what I can add to that is, we all recognize that the pandemic and the lockdown has brought a lot of sense of fear and anxiety, not just to the adults, but, to young kids who, for the first time, what they knew as normal, it just became just something completely different. And, that in itself has also been exacerbated by multiple other factors. Socioeconomic status of those families determine, how their mental health has been impacted, particularly for underserved, underprivileged communities of color. COVID has sort of exposed all the disparities we've always known that impacts communities of color disproportionately, and low-income families. Those and when you put those together, particularly for young kids, and knowing that, they can go out, play with their friends, they can go hang out with their friends, they are on, Zoom classes every single day, day in, day out. I think though, we can clearly know that it has a negative impact on their mental health. And as we go, come out of this pandemic, I think it's important for families to recognize that. It's important for the large system to actually recognize it. It's important for the healthcare system to recognize that, and to have, candid conversation with the kids, and also try to figure out. I'm looking at this a different perspective, both systematic approach as well as family approach as well, that the parents need to understand that, I think as you go out and, normalize, particularly during the summer, kids go out and play in the park, they go and hang out with their friends. Dr. Delostrinos had mentioned sometimes there's going to be a point whereby, your child is vaccinated and the other parent's child is not vaccinated, or vice versa. And, it could be a point of shaming to a certain extent for a child who's not vaccinated for whatever reason to hang out with other children, and those parents might not want them to hang out with them for whatever reason that is. And that also in itself is a trauma its own for a child who doesn't have the self-control or the the authority to vaccinate themselves because the parents did not authorize it, right? I think from a larger scale, though, I think it's important that we need to have a conversation in terms of the impact COVID has had in lack of resources for communities of color, for lack of resources for overall, and figuring out how do we address those policy-wise, systematic-wise as well. But I can understand as a parent, knowing I have a 14-year-old, 12-year-old, and younger ones, how difficult it's been for them to be out of school, for them to stay at home, and for them not to be connected with their friends, and only through media platforms. And we continue to have those conversations. I am the type of person who will drive my kids sometimes to their friends just so they can go and hang out. And I know those kids are also vaccinated. I know their parents and so forth. But at the same time, not every child has that type of luxury. And it's important that even when schools start to open up, that the teachers also start to recognize and try to understand the background of these children as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I just wanted to add too, I think what's really important for all of our mental health as we come out of this pandemic is that that we model compassion, because people are going to make different decisions than we are. Dr. Ali and I talked about solidarity, wearing our masks because our kids have to, wear their masks. And I think too, what I've been seeing a lot is, a lot of judgment. And in order for all of us to have to maintain our mental health throughout all of this, I think we all really have to take a step back and recognize that everybody is going through this differently. Everybody is dealing with this differently, including our children. And we have to be compassionate, and we have to have compassion for our children, and we have to model compassion for our children as well. And I think the more that our children feel it from us, and the more that our children see us, show it towards other people, I think the easier it will be for all of us to come out of this.
I agree with you both. I want to thank you both for being here with us. I want to thank everyone that is here for spending their time. The questions we had were great. The answers were amazing. The evidence-based, the experience-based, the research-based, everything was wonderful. So thank you. I would also like to remind everyone that our union has our back, and we want you to have the information you need to keep your family and kids safe and healthy. So if you have any more questions, or if you need assistance, contact our member connection at mcc@wfse.org, or 1-833-622-9300. 7-3. And do you two have any closing remarks before we end our conversation and Q&A this evening?
I think to conclude this discussion, it's an honor for me to be on a panel discussion with Dr. Delostrinos. I really appreciated this conversation, but I really want the families and the parents to understand that these decisions are not easy, that the point of this conversation is to ensure that we answer some of the questions that you might have in order to make an informed decision for your child. I think it's important that each parent looks at individually within their own decision-making process. At the same time, look at what that looks like overall in terms of the communities that we all live in, because it could be an individual decision, but at the same time, whatever decision you make, all the folks that you're going to be meeting at Safeway, the folks you'll be meeting at the church and the mosque will also be impacted as well. So with that, I've always believed in the power of knowledge and understanding, and this hopefully we're able to answer some of those questions that you might have with regards to the COVID vaccine. And I appreciate for the invitation to be here this evening.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Dr. Ali said. Thank you everyone for the opportunity to speak tonight. I think to go along with just mentioning be compassionate. The decisions that you've made for your children have been decisions you've made out of love. And thus far, if your kids are doing all right, which I hope they all are, you've made the right decisions because you came from a place of love. And I hope that the decision that you make regarding this vaccine, again, there's no doubt in my mind for parents that really truly love their children is going to come from that place. And I hope it feels right. It feels good. Again, surround yourself with people who you love and trust. So information is out there for you to get, but when it really comes down to making decisions for a child, we have to feel good about it. And so go to people who make you feel good about being a parent and make you feel good about the decisions you make for your children. And I think that is what's going to essentially help guide you in making the right decision.
Well, thank you both again. Thank you everyone else for being here. You all have a wonderful evening. And until our next Q&A, I will talk to you all later.